Eliana, a promising young programmer, is stuck doing cleaning duties, unfairly sidelined because she doesn't have a college degree. Her boss's harsh treatment leaves her feeling powerless. But just when it seems all hope is lost, an unexpected figure steps in, demanding justice. As tensions rise, this mysterious individual reveals something that turns the entire situation on its head. What happens next will leave you on the edge of your seat.
Mr. Davis, where are you now? It's almost time for your next meeting.
Cancel all my appointments for today.
Excuse me.
This is an emergency. Call all the executives in the building to the hallway in front of the restroom. Cancel any appointments they have with clients immediately. When I returned to America after a long time, I saw a female employee endlessly cleaning in the office. Finding it odd that a full-time employee was doing cleaning duties, I questioned her. She lamented that because she only had a high school diploma, she wasn't given proper work and was made to clean every day. Angry that my company had become obsessed with academic credentials and was excluding hardworking people, I called the CEO and all the executives to the spot. The HR manager, who had assigned her to cleaning, was also summoned, but he showed no remorse, calmly stating that it was necessary for those without degrees to learn patience through cleaning. My anger reached its peak. I asked him, a devout follower of academic elitism, what a dropout like me in high school should do. Eventually, the CEO and the executives, understanding my viewpoint, began to side with me, and the overbearing HR manager turned pale and started to tremble. My name is Josiah Davis. At 52 years old, I started a business in America at a young age and succeeded in expanding it significantly. The company has grown large, with many offices overseas. In my 20s, I ventured abroad and traveled to various countries to expand my business. As a result, by the time I reached my 50s, I had spent much more time living outside America than in it. However, recently, I stepped down as CEO and became the chairman, returning to my home country, America, for the first time in a long while. Hearing this, you might think I returned to America to enjoy a comfortable retirement after growing my business, but that wasn't the case. There was another reason for my return at this age. Before I talk about that, let me briefly reflect on the life I've led so far. I was born in a rural area of America. My parents showered me with love, but when I was still young, my father suddenly passed away from an illness, leaving my mother and me to live a financially challenging life. We were a small-scale farming family. My father worked for a company while also managing a small plot of land for additional income. However, with my father's passing, we lost the primary source of income from his job. At that point, my mother didn't have any particular skills to quickly find a job that would earn a similar income to my father's. Needing to work immediately to maintain our livelihood, my mother chose to expand our farm and grow more crops to generate income while raising young me. Although the workload increased significantly, putting a strain on her, it was a much more practical choice for my mother than starting from scratch to find a job. Considering I was still young, it was also significant that she could work while keeping an eye on me and managing her own time. So, my mother worked from morning till night, literally covered in mud, managing to sustain enough income to maintain our livelihood. I grew up watching my mother work like that in the fields from a young age, and before I even entered elementary school, I began helping with tasks I could handle. When I was a kid, helping my mother wasn't work, but rather felt like fun play, so I didn't find it hard. However, once I entered elementary school, I started to notice that many of my peers had parents who worked for companies, taking them out for fun on weekends, and buying them expensive game consoles. I quickly came to understand that my circumstances were much poorer compared to others, but I didn't feel much distress or shame about it. I had always seen my mother working hard to earn money to support us, wearing the same clothes for years, never going out for fun. As I grew older, I became an indispensable helper in the fieldwork, and when friends invited me to play, I often declined, saying, "I have to help at home." Because of this, I found it hard to make friends I could truly connect with. My mother and I always wore similar clothes, which clearly indicated our poverty, leading some classmates to mock us. There was a time when my mother was insulted with harsh words, and I ended up tackling the person and knocking him down. Even now, I don't think what I did was wrong. However, seeing my mother being forced to apologize to the other parent, I decided not to retaliate directly, no matter what was said to me. By the time I entered middle school, I had a completely different perspective on the world than my classmates. I felt a strong aversion to the idea of earning money for luxury or wielding power. Watching the vegetables grow day by day while working the soil with my mother, I came to believe that earning just enough to live was the most natural way to live. At the same time, for some reason, I excelled academically. I never paid for fancy cram schools. Instead, I paid attention in class, completed my homework after helping my mother, and went to bed early. Nevertheless, I consistently did well on tests. According to my mother, my father was very sharp, so she attributed my abilities to his genes. Observing the fields daily and watching the growth of the vegetables, calculating the potential earnings by researching market prices ahead of time, likely honed my observation and thinking skills. I continued to achieve top grades in middle school, and the school strongly recommended that I go to a prestigious high school. However, I told my homeroom teacher I plan to start working right after I graduate from middle school. By that time, I was already wary of classmates who saw me as a rival, all focused on getting into elite universities. Even if I got into a top company after all that effort, it would just mean more competition for promotions with my peers. A life of endless competition, where few can win continuously and even fewer achieve lasting success, held no appeal to me. Above all, I had no desire to further my education at the cost of making my mother, whose health was already declining, work even harder. However, at that time, I wasn't only thinking about maintaining our family farm with my own efforts after graduation. With the influx of cheap imported produce, the purchase price for the vegetables we grew had been decreasing year by year. It was clear that simply continuing to farm would lead to a slow decline. Yet, I couldn't afford to spend years in school to gain academic credentials. I first approached the local agricultural cooperative, which had been buying our vegetables, and asked for job referrals. Having been involved in vegetable transactions since I was a child, I was well known in the community, and after a perfunctory test, I was given a simple clerical job. The pay was similar to a part-time job, but being able to convert the time I had spent in school into money significantly improved our family's financial situation. The feeling of directly turning my efforts into money was refreshing and gratifying. The more I worked and increased my salary, the better our household situation became, and the less my mother had to push herself to work in the fields. My motivation for working was simple: to relieve my mother of her burden. Because it was so straightforward, my drive was strong. I quickly mastered the tasks I was initially assigned, finding ways to complete them efficiently, and then asked for more work during my free time. The agricultural cooperative started giving me various tasks that were available at the time. As a result, I gained a comprehensive understanding of how local farm produce made its way into the market and how prices were determined. Soon after, I got my motorcycle license and began visiting nearby farms to handle errands for them. Once I could drive a truck, I started helping elderly farmers who struggled to transport their harvested vegetables. Many of these farmers had young people who had either been reclusive or had returned home from the city, exhausted from their jobs. Being close in age, I often talked with these individuals. Eventually, they, like me, realized that while they didn't want to work in a job where they were constantly chasing numbers, they were not opposed to working altogether. Around that time, as I became a reliable helper for the elderly farmers, I started introducing these young people to the farms. While they might not have made the best first impression, many were diligent workers, and they built good relationships with the farmers who received their help. By connecting the idle young workforce with the elderly farmers, I unintentionally created a significant flow of people and goods in the region that the local agricultural cooperative couldn't ignore. The developments that followed were swift. Hearing rumors about me, young people from other areas began seeking me out, asking for job referrals. Most of them had no connection to the community and no experience in farming. I couldn't just send them to families in my area, especially since the number of farms needing help was limited. However, many of the young people who came to me had experience in different industries or were skilled with computers and the internet, despite having no formal work experience. I began introducing them to positions within the agricultural cooperative where their skills could be utilized. This was something I could do because I was well versed in the overall operations of the cooperative. Around this time, I decided to start my own company, employing these young people in various roles within the community. Among the initial group, several were talented programmers who soon expressed a desire to establish a software development division. Eventually, this software development division grew to the point of considering independence as a separate company. I selected a representative from among them, encouraging them to create their own company and forge their own path. However, they insisted on continuing to work under me as before. While I technically became the CEO of the company that housed their division, I handed over all control of the division to them. Given that I had no experience running a software company, this seemed the obvious course of action, but my decision was surprisingly praised as selfless and generous. Eventually, my reputation grew to the point where local governments sought my help in reintegrating young people who had withdrawn from the labor market. I became known nationwide as a young entrepreneur who revitalized the local economy by uncovering and utilizing hidden talents in the community, and my approach quickly led to the growth of my company on a national scale. Unlike a typical staffing agency, I used my own experiences to create a system where young people could work on farms in collaboration with local agricultural organizations. For the young people who didn't wish to work in agriculture, I succeeded in providing stable employment by setting them up in branches established in various regions. Unlike temporary staffing agencies, where contracts could be easily terminated due to the circumstances of the client companies, we provided an environment where they could work steadily for long periods, which attracted talented individuals with clear goals to my company. The software development company we initially started continued to attract a lot of talent, producing numerous hit software products and growing rapidly, soon gaining global recognition. By the time I was in my 30s, the company I founded had already expanded internationally, growing to a scale I had never imagined. In truth, I had already begun to desire stepping down from the front lines by this point. Regarding the now dominant software development sector, I felt there was little I could contribute, and staying at the top seemed meaningless. However, my presence at the top increased, the company's social recognition and trustworthiness in conducting honest business, so they didn't allow me to retire easily. Despite being a CEO, I remained quite mobile, and whenever we decided to expand into a new country, I would move there to learn the local situation firsthand. This was in line with my belief that living locally was the best way to gain the community's trust. Through this, I realized that similar issues existed in Western countries, Asia, and Africa alike. There were many capable individuals who couldn't keep up with the fast pace of modern society and struggled with employment. I began exploring systems to help these people work smoothly, eventually concluding that creating schools might be the fundamental solution. If young people could enter society from school in a way that suited their desired work style, the number of those excluded from society would significantly decrease. With this conviction, I started establishing schools tailored to the circumstances of each country. Initially, it was challenging to get recognized as a school in any country, so we often began as NPOs or private vocational training institutions. However, As more dormant workers re-entered the workforce through the institutions I established, the number of countries recognizing my proposed system as legitimate schools increased. Having successfully established schools in multiple countries, I decided to step down as CEO and become the chairman at the age of 50, and I returned to America for a while. Some people called my return a triumphant homecoming, but I had no such intentions. The company, now a giant corporation, operated on its own without my constant oversight. I planned to take a step back and reflect on my journey and find new things I could do from now on. If I concluded that there was nothing more I could contribute, I would step down as the chairman and withdraw from all public roles, retreating to a rural village to live out my days quietly, practicing self-sustaining agriculture. Back at the main office in America, after a long time, I reunited with the initial members I had met and started working with when I was young, telling them about my intentions for the future. Many of them wanted me to remain the chairman for life, but when I conveyed my desire to live quietly, they reluctantly respected my decision. I planned to spend a few more days at the main office, meeting with the people I needed to talk to, and then visit branch offices across the country to do the same. One day, in between meetings with executives scheduled down to the minute, I was walking to the restroom during a break. I exchanged brief greetings with people as I walked by. Due to my overseas farming work, my face was tanned, and my physique was muscular and youthful for my age. Because I had often appeared in media interviews in relatively casual attire, many employees didn't recognize me as I passed by in a suit with neatly styled hair at the main office. Some people responded to my greetings with a slightly arrogant nod, but I didn't get angry about such things. I understood that such individuals were often deeply focused on work, and it wasn't uncommon for them to be oblivious to their surroundings. Having lived abroad for a long time and spending time with many unique individuals, I had come to understand that judging people solely by their outward behavior was often meaningless. So, when I saw a female employee mopping the floor in front of the restroom, I initially paid no special attention and walked past. After using the restroom and returning to the hallway, the same employee was still mopping the floor. Normally, I would have walked past again without saying anything, but something caught my attention, causing me to stop. "Isn't that enough cleaning there?"
Huh? Oh, yes.
The young female employee, startled by my sudden voice, looked up and pressed herself against the wall. "No, I didn't mean to ask you to clear the way."
Oh, I see.
Looking at her, I noticed she had a very youthful face, probably around 20 years old. Not understanding why I had spoken to her, she looked even younger with her puzzled expression. "Sorry for speaking out of the blue. I didn't mean to startle you."
Oh, it's fine. Really?
With that, she immediately resumed mopping the floor. "The floor is already spotless. You don't need to clean it anymore, that's why I spoke to you.
Okay.
You're an employee of this company, right? Not someone from a cleaning service. Why are you polishing the floor until it shines?" I was curious about that. Forgive me if I'm being intrusive. When I said that, tears suddenly welled up in her eyes. She quickly turned away from me and wiped her eyes with a handkerchief.
It's fine. This is my job.
Seeing this, there was no way I could just walk away with a simple, "Okay then." It wasn't because she was a young woman or because she was crying. I have seen many young people lose confidence and hang their heads low from a very young age. Many of them had experienced being pushed aside and forced out of the race as soon as they stopped moving, unable to keep up with the harsh pace of society. It wasn't their fault, but they had been educated to feel guilty for stopping, leading them to believe that everything was their fault and to give up on life. In talking with these young people, I had somehow risen to the position of the chairman of this company. There was no way I could ignore her reaction. This company's cleaning is handled by a professional service. Employees shouldn't be assigned to cleaning duties. I'm familiar with the operations of this company, so I know that. If you have a reason that makes you cry, can you tell me about it?
Excuse me, but who are you?
Well, it's hard to explain in one word. You know, this company was built by people with various backgrounds, right? I'm one of those who also came into society with complicated circumstances. I hesitated to introduce myself as the chairman right away, fearing that she might get intimidated and not speak honestly. So I gave an ambiguous but truthful answer. In short, I'm someone who's known this company well for a long time. That's why I found it strange to see you in uniform cleaning here, and I wanted to ask you about it. With my explanation, she seemed to think I was one of the people who helped start the company and had a similar background, and she finally began to talk openly. She told me her name was Eliana White, and she was a recent high school graduate, just 18 years old. So you joined this company with a high school diploma. Do you have any special skills?
Nothing worth boasting about, but I passed the programming test. I've been doing it as a hobby since I was little, so I'm pretty good at it.
The programming test for the company's core software development department is known to be one of the toughest in the industry. It's open to anyone regardless of their background, but it's said that an average programmer can't pass it. If she had passed this test at such a young age, it was clear her skills were well beyond a mere hobby. You must have some serious skills to have passed such a difficult test and joined the company. So why is someone as talented as you doing cleaning work? At my question, she fell silent again, looking down. What's wrong?
I thought I'd be assigned to the software development department right after joining the company, but something seems to have stopped it due to HR's decision.
What do you mean? It might be hard to talk about in detail with someone just passing by, but if you have any thoughts or complaints, I'm here to listen. She hesitated for a while, but after looking around to make sure no one else was in the hallway, she finally spoke.
They said that a high school graduates with little social experience couldn't be allowed into such an important department right away. I was told to clean the restrooms and hallways for a while to learn the rules of society.
Social experience. Did the person who ordered you to clean say you could learn that by doing this?
I don't know. The person who gave me the cleaning tasks seemed a bit confused too. I have a feeling it's coming from higher up in HR. If that's the case, protest might just make things worse. So, I've been cleaning the hallways and restrooms all this time.
Her voice grew softer.
But the company already has a cleaning service, so all I can do is polish areas that are already clean. After doing that every day, I started to feel like I didn't know what I was doing anymore. I began to think that maybe I'm not needed in society.
As she voiced her suppressed feelings, her emotions overflowed, and she began to cry, covering her face. She tried to wipe her eyes with a handkerchief, but the tears wouldn't stop, and she turned to the wall, quietly sobbing. I'm sorry for making you talk about such painful things.
It's fine. Talking about it made me feel a bit better.
This must be fate. If it was something minor, I would have just listened. But given the circumstances, I'll get a bit involved.
What?
Still covering her face with a handkerchief, she turned to look at me as I took out my phone and called my secretary. Before it even rang once, the call connected.
Mr. Davis. Where are you now? It's almost time for your next meeting.
Cancel all my appointments for today.
Excuse me.
This is an emergency. Call all the executives in the building to the hallway in front of the restroom. Cancel any appointments they have with clients immediately. With that, I hung up before my secretary could say anything.
Hey, what did you just do?
This company was built by people who couldn't keep up with society's rules or rapid changes.
So?
Don't you think it would be meaningless for such a company to turn around and start enforcing strict social rules? I was so angry that I impulsively blurted out my conclusion. Eliana, perhaps feeling uneasy with my sudden outburst of seemingly extreme statements, took a half step back and stared at me. Soon, the sound of multiple footsteps echoed in the hallway, and the executives began to gather, starting with Michael, the CO, who appeared alongside the secretary who had taken the call. Recognizing Michael, Eliana instinctively greeted him, but as more executives arrived and began to surround her, she looked increasingly fearful. Once everyone had gathered, I began to speak. Who is responsible for assigning Eliana White here to cleaning duties? Mr. Chairman, what's this sudden urgency about?
Mr. Chairman.
Michael, just answer the question. Who halted her assignment to her department and ordered her to do unnecessary cleaning? That would be HR. Hey, is that right? Michael turned and had a hushed conversation with a few executives before turning back to me. If an individual's assignment was halted, at the very least, The head of HR must have approved it. Then call the head of HR here. One of the executives immediately took out his phone and began speaking sternly into it. Eliana finally realized that I was the chairman, and she was stunned to see me giving strict orders to Michael and other executives. Her tears completely stopped. Soon, the sound of hurried footsteps echoed, and a chubby man appeared at the end of the hallway, running and out of breath. "Oh, what is it, sir? How come I'm being summoned here? I have a visitor right now. Mason, Mr. Davis has something to ask you," the executive director said coldly. Hearing this, Mason finally seemed to realize that Michael and other high-ranking officials were all present. "What is this gathering? Mr. Davis wants to speak with me? You're the head of HR. I've been away from America for so long. Even the department heads have become unfamiliar faces. Oh, Mr. Davis, it's an honor to meet you in person for the first time. I heard you had returned. Let's skip the formalities. Explain why Eliana here was not immediately assigned to the software development department." "What? Oh." For a moment, Mason looked confused about what he was being asked, but then he seemed to remember when he saw Eliana's face. "Oh. She passed under the programming skills category. Yes. The reason we halted her assignment was, of course, because we thought that it was too soon to put her in a business environment. And what made you decide it was too soon for her to be in the field? Did you observe her work closely for some time or have any other basis for this judgment?" "Not at all. We've had numerous people who entered through the skills category with no regard for their background, and many lacked basic common sense. Some couldn't even hand out business cards properly or use polite language in greetings, which was quite exasperating. So, I directed that all skills-based hires undergo a period of social training." "When did this practice start?" I turned to Michael, who, sweating, hastily explained that he had no idea. "So, was this Mason's unilateral decision? With all due respect, I have extensive experience in HR. I believe that those who lack proper manners, especially those without a college degree, need a certain amount of training, especially for an 18-year-old high school graduate hired through the skills category. It's a very sound judgment to not put them on the field right away." "Oh. So you think high school graduates can't be easily put on the field?" "Yes. If they were to make a mistake, the effort to cover for it would be substantial. It's my duty as the HR director to ensure they acquire basic common sense. That part I can somewhat accept. But why did you assign her to cleaning to teach this common sense? If you wanted her to understand the realities of work, wouldn't it have been more beneficial to let her observe the sales floor? It's more about endurance than common sense. In business, there are many situations that don't go as one wishes, and special hires tend to give up at the slightest displeasure, sometimes retreating into seclusion. It's better to have such mature individuals leave early on. If they can't endure this level of task, they wouldn't be of any use anyway. So it's a kind of screening process." "I see." While I was busy building schools overseas, I failed to notice how much had changed within our own company. As the times change, so does common sense. Mason, not understanding the true meaning of my words, puffed out his chest with pride. Michael and other executives, who seemed to grasp the situation, turned pale. I silently took the mop from Eliana's hands and stepped in front of Mason. "So Mason, tell me something. How many months, or rather, how many years should I be polishing, and where exactly? Please give me instructions." "Excuse me? As an HR professional, you should know. I only have a middle school education. When I started working, I got a job at the local agricultural cooperative without any formal tests or interviews. I entered society through a rather unusual route, not even through the skills test category." "What? Even she, a high school graduate who passed a highly difficult test, is subjected to such training by the company's rules, correct? If the chairman were to avoid this rule, it would be considered unfair. Mr. Davis, there's no need for you to. Michael, even you, who knows how this company was founded, the kind of people who gathered, and my thoughts on connecting them. Are you siding with Mason's thinking?" Michael, who knew the time when this company was just a group of a few misfits, had a sudden realization and lowered his head in shame, remaining silent. So, Mason, if Eliana, with her exceptional skills, is assigned to clean restrooms and hallways, should I be assigned to outdoor cleaning, weeding around the office, clearing the gutters? Despite appearances, I have extensive experience in agricultural land maintenance. I'm quite capable of outdoor work. Don't hesitate to give me orders. I didn't mean it that way. Silence. If the HR professional declared this measure to be appropriate, then it should be strictly applied to everyone. From now on, if I find anyone lacking in their work, regardless of their position, I will assign them to long-term cleaning duties. This applies to all the executives present here as well. The executives, who had turned pale at my declaration, exchanged puzzled glances and began to cast harsh looks at Mason, who had caused this situation. Visibly flustered, Mason continued to offer excuses, but I no longer listened. You all know that I have been building schools overseas, right? Many of the children there couldn't study due to political or economic reasons. Many had not been properly taught manners or discipline, and many spoke to me without any reservation or formality. I closed my eyes for a moment, thinking of all the people I had met. But even though they lacked societal norms, they retained the most basic human courtesy. They understood the importance of working together, sharing smiles, and supporting each other. That's why I enjoyed working with them. Oh, I've come this far with just that belief, and I've been able to grow this company with the help of people like them. But if we are to abandon the foundation that allows motivated individuals like Eliana to thrive, then there is no point in keeping this company going. Mr. Davis, in the beginning, we had nothing. We might as well return to that state and start anew. If Mr. Davis says so, I will comply as well. If it's only going to become a suffocating organization, then indeed, there is no point in keeping this company. At Michael's words, the other executives who knew the early days of the company nodded quietly and began to say things like, I also dropped out of college. Where should I start cleaning? I'm a college graduate, but I was picked up without any tests after being a recluse. If Mr. Davis is going to clean, I will do it too. Mason, quickly, give everyone their training assignments. If the executives are out cleaning, the company won't be able to make decisions, and it might soon run into operational difficulties. But then again, those lacking in basic social manners shouldn't be entrusted with such responsibilities, right? So, it doesn't matter what happens to the company, does it? Wait, I never meant such extreme. Oh, then explain how subjecting someone as talented as Eliana to meaningless tasks and humiliation isn't extreme. My angry voice echoed down the hallway, and Mason, trembling, opened and closed his mouth, but no words came out. The secretary had to help him away as he mumbled incoherently in a daze. Turning to the stunned Eliana, who had been watching everything unfold, I apologized to her once more. I apologize for the somewhat exaggerated approach, but this was not just about you. It was a significant issue that could affect the entire company. It was very beneficial for everyone involved in management to return to our core principles at this time.
Oh, okay.
I'll ensure that you are assigned to the department as originally planned. If Mason has done this to others, we will also compensate those affected. Some may have left the company because they couldn't endure the pre-assignment period. We will investigate everything and offer reinstatement to those affected. Yes, please do that immediately. And so, this incident came to an end. Eliana was assigned to the software development department she had longed for by the end of the day. By evening, I received an email from her expressing her gratitude. While I did not specify Mason's punishment, under Michael's direction, he was given severe penalties. It was discovered that many employees had been subjected to long-term cleaning duties by Mason for unreasonable reasons. Mason was instructed to spend double the time cleaning as those he had wronged, roughly calculated to be nearly 10 years. Stripped of all his titles, Mason resigned within just a few days, unable to endure it. I later heard that Eliana was already making a name for herself in software development, showcasing her talent. I found myself reconsidering my early retirement. I began to think that I wanted to use the time I had left to create many companies where talents that society had overlooked and people with earnest hearts could thrive.